I first wanted to kind of get your angle on Scottish identity. You as a black Scot who was born in London and who has, I have given your name. I think you must have, a Scottish connections or Scottish heritage. And I, as an American who has a Scottish father and doesn't speak with a purely Scottish accent, I still feel very Scottish. And when I've seen you at the SNP conference, there is this kind of aura of acceptance and what Nicola Sturgeon has termed, I think rightly, a kind of a civic nationalism, which says that, if you live here, it doesn't matter what, color you are, if you live in Scotland, you're Scottish, which I perceive as very different from, for example, the English or other, nationalities where you have to. But I wonder. I just wanted to get your take on how deep that goes. I mean, it's one thing at the SNP conference, but how is it in broader Scottish society in terms of acceptance of you as a Scot, even though you have a darker skin color and your accent is not what you would consider purely Scottish?
I have to tell the truth in this one and say that I think the majority of Scots, if you genuinely ask them straight up, they would say I'm not Scottish. Mm-hmm. And they would say I was not Scottish because I don't have the accent, and they were partly because being black, they think I'm from somewhere else. And obviously because I'm Rastafarian, they know that I'm from Jamaica, or at least that's what they think. Yeah. So that is the presumption that's always meeting me. And the presumption that when I'm coming across people in my daily life, when I'm walking about the city centre, generally speaking, you get people who don't really live in Glasgow, who come to visit Glasgow for work and stuff. And I might be the only black person they see that day because they live in a neighbourhood where there aren't any black people. And they've just come for their drink from a Friday night or whatever, and they pass you and they say, "Oh, look at that, it's Bob Marley!" Ooh. And they think I've not heard that before. And it's ridiculous how many times within the space of a few minutes walk between the two train stations, the number of people that will say that to me, and as if I am actually deaf. Mm-hmm. So, but that only happens here. It doesn't happen in Edinburgh when I'm there. It doesn't happen in London. It doesn't happen in other big cities I've been to. Only happens to the city I've called my home for 18 years. So if in terms of how I feel about this place, I love this place. I've stayed this long. I didn't plan to stay here this long. I came to go to uni and join the political struggle, which I did. And I didn't envision myself still being here 20 years later. Mm-hmm. But it's been a good move. I love this city. I love living here, what it's about. I love the Gallicus and folks, the egalitarian spirit of people. Yeah. There is that in the national identity of Scotland, which really, really appeals to me, and which I recognise because it's rather similar to how Caribbean people are. I mean, that their sense of humour is rather similar. Their kind of slightly aggressive sardony is quite similar to our sense of humour and our sensibility. So I recognise a lot of traits within the Scottish people that I see in my own people. So I feel at home in that respect. But whether I am accepted fully as one of them, in the SNP, of course I am. But it's one thing to say that everybody who lives here is part of the nation, which we do politically. But coming with that must be all the things that we need to do to make it possible to be here, to live here, and to integrate here. We have to be honest, we haven't done all of those things. So on the one side, there's black people feeling marginalised from the opportunities they should have if they were white people, versus the perception of a lot of white people that this is a foreign element in their population. Because if you do that thought experiment, you close your eyes and somebody says to you, think of a Scotsman. Nobody would think about me as their thought experiment.
Yeah.
And that's the point. Scot is a racialised identity because we're an imperialist power coming from an empire that we were a central part of. Mm-hmm. So of course we have a perception of ourselves as just white Scots. Mm-hmm. That was important. That's why it was important to do that show, the Black and Scottish show, because it showed that actually there are people who've grown up here, who've lived here their whole lives, who know nowhere else. It's their home. Mm-hmm. And they have the accent, they have the culture, they have Perth accents, Inverness accents, Aberdeen accents. They have all of the accents going across this country. Yeah. And that's great to hear them speak it, because it's largely tied up, Scottishness, with language. Clearly it is. And so that's possibly why I feel that many people don't accept me as a Glaswegian. I think if you live in a city and you live in a place, if you're a part of your local community and you're active in it, most people will accept you in it. But whether they accept you as part of their nation, that's another thing.
Who find it hard to accept that we are fully Scottish.
I've often been asked the stupid, Rangers Celtic question. Well, are you a Protestant Rasta or a Catholic Rasta? Glasgow, as a city, has been marking Black History Month, but it wasn't until 2017, I and my colleagues came into office, that the council, the city council itself, actually hosted something. The first time it's had the civic stamp on it, where the leader of the council herself has also addressed it, so it's been given a much more higher profile by that. If you have a slavery name, it's inherited from the ancestors who were owned and enslaved by the people who owned the plantation. So I knew that Scotsmen had done that. So I always say that we are kind of like walking exhibits in a crime scene, in the sense of we're the evidence that Scotland had this colonial